Hi everyone and welcome back to the Retro Shack, and to this, the first of our Amiga series. And the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed this A500 sitting proudly on the shelf behind me at the rear of the studio, and you might think that's where we'd start, but unfortunately I refurbished that machine just before starting the channel, so I wanted to start with something a little bit more mucky and in need of some love and attention. Also, this model has some significance in the Amiga lineup, being the last of the Amiga models to use the 68000 architecture, the 16-bit internal bus 32-bit processor. And you would think that being the last of the line, it's probably the most advanced and best Amiga of that generation, but is it? We'll also take a look at why this machine came to be in the first place, and why, perhaps unfairly, it's the most unloved Amiga of all time. I never owned one of these machines, so I'm looking forward to getting stuck in. Join me as we discover the Amiga A600. So what's in our little pile of Amiga loveliness? Well, of course, there's the Amiga 600 itself. It's been in storage for many years before making its way to the shack, and although it doesn't seem too discoloured from the nasty old sunshine, it is very dirty. The warranty sticker on the bottom is broken, so that means someone has been inside previously. That may mean that repair work or upgrades have been done in the past, so let's cross our fingers that nothing is amiss. Speaking of stickers, the one on the front still has its protective plastic wrap. Nice. I'll leave it in place for as long as possible through the refurb, but that will be coming off at some point. I can't resist. When we come to the teardown, I'm hoping there's nothing nasty lurking under this trapdoor. A lot of Amigas had memory upgrades, and a lot of them had real-time clock modules, which means a battery. Fingers crossed for that one. We've got the standard house brick Amiga power supply unit. These are normally pretty reliable, but of course we'll check the voltage outputs before going anywhere near our machine. And give this a flipping good clean also. We've got an external floppy drive which weighs a metric ton, and I doubt this will feature in the machine's future, so this will probably end up back on the shelf for emergencies, but we'll clean it all up first, of course. We have the original manuals that shipped with the machine. They seem in nice condition, and we have a box of assorted cables and an aftermarket mouse. Finally, we have a number of joysticks, and in particular this one, a Megastar SV133, which is an absolute stonker of a joystick. Great for a game of Speedball 2. Right, before we get stuck into taking all of this apart, let's take a look at how this machine came to exist in the first place. The Amiga 600 came as a bit of a shock to the world of Amiga users, launching as it did only 6 months after the A500 Plus, and it shared much of the same architecture, including the new enhanced chipset, plus a couple of extras in the way of an external PCMCIA slot and an internal IDE interface, which unfortunately wasn't activated in the ROM if you got a really early edition, and you needed drivers on floppy to use them in that case. Naughty Commodore. But the real problem with the A600 is that it didn't fit in the Amiga range. It was neither one thing or the other. It was all of the A500 Plus internally, it was in a smaller form factor, and did away with the numeric keypad, which incidentally meant some games that relied on that were now unplayable. Next to the Amiga 500, it looked, well, less of a machine, but Commodore brought it out at the same price as the A500 Plus. So what was going on? Well, basically, it was all a big mess. What Commodore originally intended was a machine that would sit below the A500 Plus in the model lineup, being both smaller and around $60 cheaper, and it was originally intended to be badged the A300. In fact, some of the early machines actually have an A300 mainboard. But Commodore had spent too much, become too ambitious with the project, and the costs and spec had now resulted in a machine that simply couldn't be made and sold for that price and still make money. The answer? Change the name, change the price, and launch to a confused world. Oh, and effectively kill the A500 Plus market stone dead. Because if you could live without the numeric keypad, why wouldn't you go for the 600 with the hard disk and PCMCIA options? Let's take a little look inside. There's my screwdriver. So this little beauty is the reason the A500 Plus was the shortest lived Amiga of all time, being on sale for only around 6 months. And really it all seems like a lot of effort for very little return for Commodore, as this model was itself replaced by the A1200 only 1 year later. I can't help but wonder what they could have come up with if they'd instead focused their efforts on maintaining the 500 Plus for a year, forgetting the 600/300 in the first place, and just putting that extra money and time into making the 1200 something truly spectacular and on par with what was being released in the PC market at that time. Anyway, under this trapdoor there is indeed a memory expansion, and there's a battery on there, although good news, doesn't look like it's leaked. If we're to continue using that, I will of course want to replace that battery with a non-leaky type. Be very careful when opening the case for the first time, as there are a couple of leads you'll need to undo and you don't want to damage those. First of all, there's the LED connection strip on the right hand side, and then at the back a very delicate membrane ribbon cable. This one be especially careful with. And with the keyboard out of the way, our suspicions of course were correct. Someone's been in here and installed a hard drive. This one looks like an 85 meg hard drive, so very nice. We can also see we've got one of the later revision A600 boards, so no A300 mainboard for us. So that should mean we'll have no difficulty in booting from the hard disk, or indeed using this PCMCIA slot. The board itself looks nice and clean. It's obviously been stored in a nice environment, and no sign of any battery damage from this or any other trapdoor expansion. Nice. To remove the floppy drive unit, there are 2 screws on the bottom of the case, and there's one further that connects the chassis to the mainboard from the top. We'll be replacing this floppy drive with a Gotek drive anyway, so we'll just take this out and put it on one side. Removing the floppy drive was easy enough, but when it came to removing the hard drive, I was a bit flummoxed. I couldn't actually see anywhere that the caddy was fixed to the mainboard. I just assumed it must be screwed in, but couldn't find them. So I removed the IDE cable and then thought I'd better have a look underneath the mainboard to see if it screws in from there. And quick spoiler alert, it doesn't. It does just clip in. However, I needed to take this out anyway, so I could get rid of the bottom of the case, and then of course remove the RF shield. We won't be needing that in this day and age. Now this RF shield also caused me a little bit of trouble. It really is fixed in there very well, considering it's never going to move anyway. There were little metal tabs all the way around holding it in, and then of course at the back all of the ports are held in by screws, and all had to be removed in order that I could take the RF shield out. Very annoying. And with the RF shielding out of the way, it was clear that the hard disk caddy was indeed only held in by pressure, so with a little bit of pulling, the whole unit soon came free. We won't be installing this back in the machine again, so we'll place it to one side for spares or emergencies. And with our Amiga 600 mainboard laid bare before us, let's have a little look at the stats. So our processor is a Motorola 68000, and this is a PAL machine, so that's running at 7.09 MHz. The NTSC models run at a slightly elevated 7.16 MHz. For RAM, we have 1 MB of chip RAM, and there's a further 1 MB that you can put in the trapdoor. You can also on these models put up to 4 MB of SRAM or fast RAM in the PCMCIA slot. Our ROM is a 512K unit, and that contains all of the basic I/O for the machine. We have the enhanced chipset or ECS, which gives us a very game friendly 320 by 200 mode with 32 or 64 colours, right the way up to a stonking 1280 by 512 interlaced mode for more serious work. Audio remains unchanged from other Amiga models, with 4 8-bit PCM channels, which can be configured as 2 stereo channels. On the rear we have a vast array of connectors, including a video out, colour composite video out, our RF audio video out and audio out. We also have 2 mouse or gamepad ports, an RS-232 serial port, a parallel port, a floppy disk drive port, and of course our
internal 44-pin ATA controller and the PCMCIA slot as previously mentioned. And that's all there is to it.
So there's our Amiga 600, all laid bare and ready for some love and attention. But what are we going to do with it? Well, I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. This is part 1. Part 2 will be what I'm calling essential maintenance and refurbishment. So that's a recap, that's fitting of some more memory to bring it up to Commodore's maximum recommended at the time of 6 megabytes, potentially a hard disk option of some kind, and maybe even occupy that PCMCIA slot with a second hard disk option or CF card. Then I'm going to drift off on a bit of a tangent with this machine, which I'm hoping you'll find very interesting. And then we'll come back and do what I'm calling my performance upgrades on this machine, and that's going to be a processor improvement, potentially even more memory, and we'll see what else we can throw in there. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to the Commodore Amiga 600. If you like the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of new content. As always, please leave your comments, we always love to read them, and until next time in the shack, goodbye.